dependent upon the availability of scrap raw materials. So we're kind of a downstream buyer of raw steel materials. But
what would happen? What would happen if we could not manufacture steel in America? What would that do to your business?
It would be disastrous. It would absolutely be disastrous because our raw material stream would more or less have to be imported, and costs would go up substantially.
We've got a regulatory issue right now with the EPA that is proposing to release a rule sometime between June and September 14th. September 14th is the latest date that we've been given. Manganese ferroalloy is a required raw ingredient in steel manufacturing. You don't manufacture steel without it. Otherwise, you can't bend and mold and shape the steel into the components that you want. We have 2 remaining manganese ferroalloy producing facilities in America. One of those is in Marietta, Ohio. One of them is in Latark, West Virginia. If this rule were to go forward in its proposed state, the compliance requirements are so economically infeasible, requiring those plants to put an enclosure around their facility, that it would essentially shut those plants down. You're talking about 500 plus jobs, and you're talking about the elimination of a required raw ingredient that we would then have to go buy in places like China and Korea and other places overseas. So those are the kind of onerous regulatory burdens and uncertainty that affect businesses like Jeff in terms of growing and expanding. How do you convince boards of directors and business investors to invest in their companies and grow and expand when they just don't know what the federal government is going to do next in terms of the regulatory process? And it's a constant, everyday fight. We passed a piece of legislation out of the House of Representatives called the REINS Act. It's an acronym. It stands for Regulations by the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. And it basically requires, and it puts back into the hands of the American people the regulatory process, because it requires congressional approval for any regulation that costs our economy more than $100 million in a single year. And trust me, there aren't many regulations that they release that don't cost at least $100 million. Today, regulations cost our economy about $1.7 trillion per year. Yes, sir.
Isn't this kind of legislation, the micromanagement that's created the catastrophe that we face today?
Say again.
Isn't this kind of legislation the very...
You're talking about the REINS Act?
Yeah. No, the REINS Act and the EPA regulations, this micromanagement of the industries in this country are causing the demise of our country.
Oh, absolutely. If
we're competing in a world market where Japan and China don't have hardly any regulations in comparison, and none of us. I lived during the steel mill days in Struthers, Ohio, where I could look out from the south side and see an orange haze over the valley from the sulfur that was coming off of the mills. We don't want to go back there. But don't we have enough that we're choking our industries, we're choking the private individuals and the investors like this gentleman and others, small business people, to the point where there'll be nothing left but food lines and no money to fill those food lines because the government will have it all.
And for us to rein those regulatory agencies in that work for the executive branch, the only way to do that is to be able to pass legislation to prevent them from doing what they do. And that's what we're struggling with right now.
And I've spoken to you privately several times, Bill, and I appreciate your heart and what you're trying to do. I hope the people in this room know that this man is your representative, and he's hearing what you're saying. And it's not lip service like we've gotten from so many other people that have stood in his office or in others. Because I've listened to this man's heart, and I know he's speaking the truth as best he can, and he's going to be limited by what we can equip him to do and other legislators around this valley and, and on from here. But my concern is, how do we turn back the clock? How do we get rid of some of this, excuse me, but crap that we're stuck with in the way of legislation? It's like sludge in my veins. It's slowing my heart down.
There's one way, and there's one way only. When our founding fathers wrote this little document called the Constitution of the United States, it's a document that is brilliant in its simplicity. You can read through this thing in less time than it takes you to read the Sunday paper. And it puts the control of the greatest, most powerful nation on the planet in the hands of the government, of the people. I'm going to tell you that we have a responsibility, a civic responsibility, to go to the polls and let our voices be heard. For so long we have elected people based on whose name we recognize, popularity contests, who had the fanciest ads, and those kinds of things. What we need to be looking at is the heart of the individual, the character of the kinds of people that we're going to send there to be our voices. Because I can guarantee you that our founding fathers knew something that many, many people in Washington have long forgotten, and some have just chosen to ignore. And that is that the heartbeat of this nation has far more to do with what happens around the dinner table than with what happens in the halls of Congress. And until we change the character of the people that we send there, we're not going to change the solutions and the actions that they come up with. Yes, sir.
The frustrating thing that I'm hearing tonight, and I've understood this for a long time, you're just reinforcing it, is the fact that the House is moving in a positive direction, but everything hits that bottleneck in the Senate. And until that Senate bottleneck is broken open, nothing's going to happen, as I see it.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the fact that Harry Reid's got at least another 4 years left, and you've got, you know, the Olympia Snows and some of these other rhinos, you know, sitting up there, you know, until, as you said, until some of these people are replaced.
But our founding fathers put a system of government in place that was designed to move slowly. You've heard the term that the wheels of government move slow. They moved slow because our founding fathers intended them to move slow. They did not want a new president, a new Senate, or a new House of Representatives to come in and start undermining what they had worked so hard to do. They put in place a very deliberative and debative process. It is agonizingly hard to get consensus and agreement on legislation, especially, we just talked about some of the complexities right here. How do you address a tax issue, for example, in the context of today's environment? It would drive you crazy, because if you address this piece here, you're going to unravel so much more over here. And I could give countless examples of that. And so it is a painful, painful process. Here's the good news. The good news is that I believe in the indomitable spirit of the American people. We have been around this debate so many times before in our nation's history. They went through it when they founded the country. You had those that believed in big government, be like England, you know, a massive federal government, versus those that wanted individual liberty, freedom, the private sector, free enterprise.